Hi, my name is Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to Box F1 Pod. Welcome to the Brazilian Grand Prix episode. We actually had a really good race, and we didn't even need rain to do it. We did have some rain during the sprint. There were puddles that created some chaos, but the actual race was dry, and we still had racy racing. We're going to chat all about it, from Lando dominating to Max's insane comeback to Oscar's almost moment. He almost did it, and then it didn't work out. And I have many thoughts about that. But every time we're like, this will lock in the championship, it doesn't. So things are still up in the air, though it's looking significantly more towards one side. But regardless, while we chat, I'm going to be making pão de queijo, which are the Brazilian cheese balls, and I'm also going to be making a caipirinha, which is a Brazilian cocktail. However, the main ingredient in it is cajaca, which is a Brazilian spirit, and I do not have that. However, so it's actually nothing like the cocktail. I mean, it is, other than the main ingredient. But I will be replacing it with gin, my favorite gin, and I chose it because for the same metaphor I always choose this gin for, British champion today, the British winner, Lando, and then Lil Kimi Antonelli got second, and this is gin made in Italy. So I'm hoping you'll forgive the serious lack of authenticity of my cocktail because of the lovely metaphor I've just painted for you guys. All right, so I'm going to get started with that. And in the meantime, let's dive into the digital warm-up. Lap 1. All right, lap 1, F1 news. So Franco Colapinto has been confirmed for Alpine 2026. I'm pouring some of the engine. I think it's a little weird. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Franco Colapinto. You're never going to catch me hating on him being in F1. However, we got rid of Jack Doohan. I'm not taking responsibility for that. They got rid of Jack Doohan after like 5 races for not getting any points, and Franco has had 15 races to get points, and I have not seen him do that. And that's not to say that Jack is necessarily better than Franco. Clearly, the car is not great. Like, I mean, Pierre is struggling all the time as well, and he's the experienced driver here. So that this is not me being like Jack is so much better. Why are we choosing a worse driver than Jack? It's more like, why are we giving Franco more chances than we gave Jack? My guess is it has something to do with sponsorship. I'm assuming Franco comes with deep pockets. Not that Jack didn't, but probably less so than Franco. And that would be my only guess, because both, like, there's no way to tell who's better or who's worse, because Jack didn't really get a fair chance. Franco has not produced like better results than Jack, and we don't maybe Jack would have continued to be bad. Maybe he would have continued to be exactly like Franco. Maybe he would have been better. We just don't know, because he wasn't given the chance, which is quite unfortunate. In other F1 news, this is sort of, if you guys remember last race in Mexico, Liam Lawson almost killed some marshals. Well, he almost hit some marshals. I don't know if they would have died, but probably, because they were out on track at the wrong time. And the Mexico Motorsport Federation blamed Liam for the almost incident, being like he should have been more careful. And I think that's stupid. And actually, not just me, the FIA agrees that it's stupid for Liam to get the blame, because the marshals were just not supposed to be on the track when there were cars coming, and whoever was managing the situation, whether that's the FIA or whoever else, or just they weren't listening, that's who's responsible, not Liam, who's in the middle of driving an F1 car and just not expecting human beings to be on the track. So I'm glad that he was defended for that. So moving on, lap 2, off-track F1. It was Max and Kelly's anniversary recently. Last week, I believe. And she actually shared, it was really sad, that their daughter is a rainbow baby. So she had a miscarriage, and they had found out on the way to Brazil last year that she was pregnant. And she posted like a picture of Max with like on a plane with his footprint pink. So I guess that's how they did the gender reveal, like stomping on something. And honestly, incredibly sad, but also really happy that they have little Lily now and everything worked out. Speaking of anniversaries, sort of, Charles and Alex, his girlfriend, got engaged, which is so exciting. I think they got engaged a week or so, or a couple weeks ago, before he actually posted about it, but they posted about it last week. And it looked beautiful. The ring is beautiful. Leo was part of it. He had a little dog tag that said, "Dad wants to marry you." It was all very wholesome. And then there was also, he had done like rose petals on the ground in the shape of a heart. It was very cute, very romantic. I'm simultaneously like not surprised that he proposed, but also a little surprised that he proposed for some reason. I guess this is the first proposal we've seen from an F1 driver. Like, it's not surprising in the sense that I didn't think they were locked in. Like, it really did seem like they were going to get engaged. It just felt like it would be later. But I'm very happy for them. And then this weekend, it was like the talk of the paddock. Everyone kept congratulating him. There was a funny video of him seeing Alex like flashing his hand, being like the ring. And then walking up to Alex and being like, "Is the pressure on you now?" In the press conference, he was asked who he thinks will be next. And Pierre was sitting next to him. He's like, "Well, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Pierre. Going to pressure him." I thought Pierre and Kiki broke up. That was the rumor. Or Kika broke up recently. That was the rumor. But I guess not. All right, moving on to Passenger Princess. We had got our final 2 episodes over the last couple of weeks, which I'm really sad about, because it was a great series and I wish it was longer, and I wish the episodes were longer, and I wish it was doing it with every driver. But we got Oscar and Carlos. So Oscar's episode, I loved Oscar's episode because he's definitely on par with her humor. Like, it's not like her humor is lost on him. I think they might probably have quite a similar sense of humor. He's just like quieter. So like it wasn't that he wasn't finding it funny. He just kind of blinked at her a lot of the time, which was kind of funny. Also, for some reason, Oscar was the only driver not to give a lesson in an SUV. Everyone else gave, like, they were luxury SUVs, but they were still giving lessons in SUVs. Even like Oscar was like, most people don't learn how to drive in a McLaren. Which is crazy. She asked him where he learned to drive. She's like, "Was it in Australia?" He's like, "No, I learned in England." She was like, "Do you like England?" And he was like, parts of it. And then Emily was like, "So how does it feel like being in the passenger seat?" And Oscar was like, "I am bricking it." Not really sure how he could be bricking it when they were going literally so slow, but she doesn't know how to drive. So, and they have trouble letting go, even people who do have a license. So I can imagine this was not easy. And then Emilio was like, "Do you have any advice for me?" He's like, "Yeah, eyes on the road." Also, I did find this very funny because this is low-key what I also thought when I first started watching F1, when she puts her hands on the bottom of the steering wheel and she goes, "Am I understeering?" And then puts her hands on top of the steering wheel. She's like, "Am I oversteering?" And he's like, "No." And then Emilia was like, what part of you is the most buff as an F1 driver? He's like, "My neck." She's like, "Did you want a big neck?" And he was like, "No." And she's like, "I don't really want a big neck, so maybe I shouldn't be an F1 driver. Do you think it'd be a good one?" And she asked these questions and they're so funny. Tapioca starch is a messy beast. It looks like I've just done cocaine all across this kitchen. But anyway, she was like, "So do you think I should be an F1?" And he was like, "I feel like you have talents that lie elsewhere." She's like, "So you don't think I'd be a good F1 driver?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think you have talents that lie elsewhere." And then she brought up the last win. This was a long time ago, obviously. The last win he dedicated to his sister. And then she was like, well, next time you win, which I don't think has actually happened since I've recorded this. Will you dedicate it to me? And he was like, I have a really long list of people before you. But maybe if you pass your driver's license exam, I will consider it. And she was like, okay, well, that's not happening anytime soon. Then the Carlos Sainz episode was also hilarious. And Carlos like sits down in the car. He's like, so is it true you just got your driver's license? And she's like, yeah, I don't have my driver's license. And he was like, okay. And then she goes, do you? And Carlos just like blinks at her. And then she goes, I was better than the other drivers when they taught me. Don't you think confidence is good? And Carlos was like, confidence, yes. Overconfidence, no. And then Amelia, she clearly was joking because Ollie taught her how, but she was like, how do you turn on the car? Or George did. She's like, so how do you turn on the car? And Carlos visibly panics. Like, he's like, are you joking? And then, so their task was weaving in between cones. And he I don't know if anyone remembers, but like when Carlos and Charles were both at Ferrari, throwback, they would do those like blind track thing on the simulator. And then one of them would be driving on the simulator and the other one would be directing them. And it would always get really loud and aggressive. That's how he was with her. He just kept going, don't hit the cone, right, left, don't hit the cone. And it was like just immediate flashback. Then after she finished her task and she braked, she was like, how do I brake again? Do I let go of the other pedal? And he was like, yes. She's like, I don't think I breathed the whole time. And Carlos was like, we went 5 kilometers an hour. Then he's like, no, let's switch. Like Carlos was so eager to drive. It was so funny. So they switched and she was like, do you use the sat nav when you're in the car? And is it in English or in Spanish? And he was like, I hate that voice. I never turn it on. And she was like, well, what if it was my voice? Would you like it more? And he was like, no, that would be even more annoying. But then Carlos starts to drive and she goes, Oscar was faster than you. And he's like, well, he was probably driving a faster car, which he was. And then Carlos was like, so who gave you lessons? She broke it down. And then she starts to move on. And she was like, so do you think I could drive the safety car? And he interrupts. He's like, no, give me the gossip. Who did you get along with? Who was nice? Well, she said that Ollie was really nice. And he was like, yes, I get along with Ollie really well. We cycle together. And she's like on a bike. And then when they get back they did the full lap. He did the around the cones and then they did a full lap around the track. And when they got back, he braked really hard to be in front of the cone, which was also part of I think she was supposed to learn how to park also. And she was like, I hate when people park like that and you just jolt forward. And he was like, really, did I do that? And she was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, should we go check how close to the cone I am? And like runs out of the car. Oh my God, Carlos. He was very close to the cone. Anyway, this was a 10 out of 10 series. It was so funny. I wish there was more I know she's like, all her content's really short, but I feel like we just need more. And I would love to see her do it with every driver and for her to actually then take the test. Anyway, Max, after Mexico City, went straight to Brazil to visit with Kelly's family. And he was on a Brazilian podcast they did it in English, but he was on a podcast with with Gabby Bortoletto. All the rookies love Max Verstappen. It's actually crazy. Gabby saying his praises was like a lot of people in F1 just don't talk to anyone who's not in F1, and Max is not like that. He's like trying to be really inclusive. He's always helping me. He's always down to talk. And it's just so wholesome to see Max literally just be a mother. You know what he reminds me of? For anyone who's seen Stranger Things, he reminds me of Steve. Steve with the kids. Like that's the energy he's giving with the rookies. And it's just so unexpected for Max, but also not unexpected because he's a nice guy. Also, Max's tire strategy in Mexico City when everyone was on softs and he went on mediums and it ended up paying off. Gabby was also on mediums, and he said that was specifically because of Max, because he talked to him. He's like, what are you going to do? Max is like, you should go on mediums. And he came back, he's like, the whole team had already prepared the softs, and he's like, no, we're going on mediums. So Oscar did a segment with Sky Sports, and they did it in Monaco, and he dropped a couple of fun tidbits. He was asked if he speaks any French, and he was like, well, I get my hair cut by Charles's mom, and she doesn't speak any English. Which, by the way, if Murder Mystery 1, the Adam Sandler movie, had made the villain not an F1 driver, but an F1 driver's mom, it perhaps would be more believable. Also, sorry, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Murder Mystery 1, but it's been out for years, so not my fault. But anyway, we also found out, he was asked what drivers do on the plane all the time. And he's like, I've actually been in a really deep Uno championship with George and Alex. However, some people, I won't name names, keep pulling out some weird family rules that I've never heard of playing Uno that keep helping him win. Cough, cough, George. And honestly, I've never heard anything more George. He follows the rules, but to find rules that specifically benefit you that no one knows about is such FIA. What is he part of? The FIA, the Drivers Association, whatever. I've never heard anything more George in my life. So also in Brazil, Kimi went to visit Senna's grave, and there were pictures of him visiting the grave, putting down flowers, and then afterwards, dressed in the most like 90s / Gen Z fit ever, like short sports shorts, over the ear headphones. He's sitting on a bench right like outside of where Senna's grave is, reading Senna's biography. And it was so cute. The pictures of him at the visiting the grave, they were posted either by him or the team, but the pictures of him reading on the bench were either fan shots or paparazzi shots. But he visited Senna's grave, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but this is the first time I've seen a driver do it in this capacity, and also reading the biography. And he performed so well this weekend. I'm like, was this some sort of seance? Has he been possessed by the ghost of Senna? But yeah. All right, lap 3, track-sided Interlagos. Seb was there, and he was, as usual, at a race to promote a specific cause. This time it was saving the rainforest and saving the trees, and in particular, since they were in Brazil, local forests that need help and restoration and not to be destroyed. So he did an activity with everyone. Everyone drew a tree. He actually did the same activity with Prince William. So all the drivers drew a tree, and my two favorite ones, most of them were just like trees, but my two favorite drawings of the trees were Alex Albin's, who drew a tree with a smiley face on it. It was like a humanoid tree, and called it Terry the Tree. I don't know why. So Terry the Tree was a 10 out of 10. It was like one of the... am I making this up? I swear the trees in Snow White, the Disney Snow White, had like faces on them, or did I make that up? There's some cartoon or animation where the trees have faces. That's what it looked like, just not as well drawn. And then Lewis's tree was like a collage, like it was a full-on art piece. And I don't know if he brought his own materials and everyone else just had crayons, or how he created this tree collage, but it was extravagant and beautiful. Lewis probably doesn't draw. Lewis creates art, and it shows. I suppose inspired by George, although maybe it wasn't, but I feel like it was. Franco went undercover at a fan stage event. He walked up through the crowd wearing like a mustache and like a employee jacket, but it was like a really intense mustache. People might not be able to know that it was Franco, but they certainly knew that's not what a person looks like. Someone was in disguise, but that was fun. Charles, Oscar, and Lewis got dinner at a steakhouse all together. Extremely curious what Lewis ate, because me personally, when I go to Brazilian steakhouses, I only go for the cheese balls and the mashed potatoes and the polenta. which is what they have at my steakhouse, because I don't eat red meat. But I eat dairy, so I have options. At least what I think is the most delicious thing at a Brazilian steakhouse. Lewis doesn't have those options, so I'm not really sure what he ate there. Maybe they had vegan options, but what would that be? A salad? But anyway, he was at a Brazilian steakhouse with Oscar and Charles. Also, trackside at Interlagos, the driver's parade was the best thing they've done since the Legos in Miami. They had like these little go-karts. And other than Gabby, who had his own, and therefore Nico had his own, all the drivers, both of the drivers were shoved into one tiny little go-kart. And it is small. It is a small go-kart. The drivers were having more fun than the Lego races because these cars could actually drive faster. So they were full on racing each other. They also had like a little bench in the back where I think the second driver was supposed to sit or kneel or something. But like a lot of times they just shoved themselves into the cockpit together. Alex and Carlos, classic Alex and Carlos, literally raced each other, like pushing each other out of the way, pushing other people out of the way for who would drive. Alex won, so Carlos was a passenger princess. He somehow shoved himself into the cockpit with, and I would understand if this was like Isaac and Liam. They're both relatively small, but Carlos and Alex are not small people. How they shove themselves into this like little toy go-kart is comical. But then like also Carlos had some like very interesting positions. He was like fully splayed out in the back on that bench, and he was like squatting on the bench. Like he like clearly couldn't find a position for himself. The Mercedes car broke down, so they had to be picked up. Kimmy ended up in the car with Nico, so it was just both of them, and he fit right into that little cockpit with Nico. And Max and Yuki picked up George, and I turned on the TV in the middle of that, and I just see like Yuki, George, and Max flying by on the track, like wind in their hair, like. George and Max both look terrified but thrilled. And Yuki is in the middle with like something covering his face to like, I guess it was like a scarf or a hat, like hiding from the wind. And it looks so funny. Like it looks like a joke. And then at the end, afterwards, Charles was like, "This is the best thing we've ever done in my whole entire life. Everyone should get their own next time, and we should do it at every track. And it's like the best thing that's ever happened." They were loving it. And I love when they let these drivers act like children, because they're all just like little kids dying to drive a little go-kart around. Oh, also the Aston Martin boys got picked up by Lando and Oscar. So I think it was Lando and Oscar. So I think there were 4 people in that car, which is a little crazy. But it was so much fun. And all of the pictures from that, the drivers, like it's like Lego Who. We thought that was peak driver's parade. This was peak driver's parade. I've never seen them happier. Of course, half of them were miserable 20 minutes later. But for one blissful moment, everyone was happy in a little go-kart. Sometimes 4 people were happy in one go-kart. And it was wonderful. And that actually concludes our digital warm-up. On to the most exciting part of our weekend, which isn't always the case, the race. Let's move on to analysis. All right, moving on to analysis. As we hit analysis, I'm going to put one set of balls in here, and then I'm going to put the other half in the freezer because they're only good hot, and I'm not about to eat like 46 balls. Right, so sprint qualifying, Kimi got second or third. He was in top 3, and immediately ran to hug Max. It was his first hug. There was an incident where water got on the racing line, either Lando or Kimi's fault, but it caused Oscar to spin out and crash, which caused the red flag. Literally, poor Oscar cannot catch a break. He's not even doing anything wrong. He's just like not doing anything right. Gabby also had a horrible crash during the sprint race, like towards the end. Like what they showed on the TV was not quite, they only showed part of it. I don't think they showed the full thing because the full thing was wild. I saw a fan view of the full crash, and I think he did 2 hits. Like he got rammed into the wall and then he like bounced off and then slammed into the opposite end. And it looked like there was basically nothing but the seat and the wheels left. And it was intense. So the fan view, like it was literally just like the seat and wheels left. Like the crash was so intense, like it makes you jump. Apparently it was like a 57G impact, which is a lot. He was inspected by medical. He was fine. I don't even know how he was fine. So like the cars are sturdy. They're big, but there's a reason they seem so gentle, but they truly protect the driver, because like that, a driver would not have survived that crash over like 20 years ago, maybe even less. Max was really struggling with this car on Friday and Saturday, like tragically struggling. He complained during sprint, like waiting when he was driving in for the red flag, that he was struggling with something, and GP's like, all we can do is give you recommendations. It's up to you if you take them or not. I love when they argue. It's so funny. After the sprint, George described the water splashing by Lando. I guess Lando became the culprit of the water splashing. Maybe it was Kimmy, but everyone seems to think it was Lando. As a banana in Mario Kart, which really is what it ended up causing. And then in quali, Max was out in Q1 for the first time since 2021, but it was the first time in his career due to like a pace related issue. Like purely based on speed, he did not make it past Q1. And then today, he ended up doing a change to the engine in some capacity. So he ended up starting from the pit lane instead of P16, which is where he qualified, because he was really struggling with the engine and he probably was like, it's not worth it. Last year, we watched him do a phenomenal comeback in the wet from P17 to winning the race, which was insane. But he's starting the pit lane, which is an even worse situation. But it's Max. Everyone wrote him off. Actually, literally everyone wrote him off. And that the championship's over. There's no way. I kind of was like, what is he going to do in these? Like, it's going to be hard. He doesn't have the same car he had last year. Never doubt Max Verstappen, honestly. Never doubt him. So the starting grid is as follows: Lando, Kimi, Charles, Oscar, Isaac, George, Liam, Oscar, Pierre, Nico, Fernando, Alex, Lewis, Lance, Carlos, Max, Ocon, Franco, Yuki, and Gabby. The weather at Interlagos there was a storm was rumored, but the weather report said dry, but it's also Brazil. So in conclusion, the weather going into the race was unknown, because in F1, we never know what the weather is because no one can read the weather radar. I feel like there's either a storm coming or there's no storm coming, and there was nothing. It was dry. The Saturday was wet, not like raining during when they were on track, but there were puddles. Sunday was dry. Nothing. Anyway, all right, let's get into the race. There was a few great things to discuss, but really there's one incident that changed the trajectory of the majority of this race. But we'll start with the start. Almost immediately, Gabby ended up in the wall, which is really tragic, but also it's his home race. I don't know who was expecting this to go well. Home races rarely go well. There's like a handful of times when you can see a success. Like obviously he wasn't going to win. That's like crazy. That's really rare. But like something always goes, there's some sort of home race curse going around. And he had a terrible weekend. Terrible. He crashed out in the first turn. Hometown hero. I mean, it is stressful. Like the entire country has come down to see him. His whole family's there. His management is there. Everyone is there. Everyone is waiting for him to, at minimum, make it past lap one, and he crashed out. And then he had that horrible race yesterday, the horrible crash yesterday towards the end of sprint that meant he didn't even get to participate in qualifying. So he started P20 at his home race. And it just went from bad to worse for poor Gabby Bortoleto. And I felt so bad for him. He'll come back. Like he's obviously not going anywhere. He's sticking it with Audi for next year at the very least. So he'll have another chance. Okay. Anyway, so at the start, Lando got a good start. Gabby crashed. He says Lance pushed him out, but it's a turn one incident. He was like, no one's really at fault. There's nothing you can do. Things happen in turn one. It's just really unlucky that this happened to me. And it is really unlucky. Lando had a good start. Lewis got a lot of damage, and it was a little confusing because the only crash we saw was Gabby and they were nowhere near each other. So it was like, how did that happen? But it looks like he had an incident with Franco, I think, but I also don't think he was that near Franco. So I'm not really sure what happened with Lewis, but he had some sort of incident and he had floor damage and he ended up DNFing. But it was caused by issues at the start, and just day went from bad to worse also. Which takes us to the biggest incident of the race. Gabby's crash caused a safety car, and once the safety car ended, there was a rolling start. And Oscar plunged forward. And at this time, he was still back in P4. And he lunged forward and tried to overtake Charles and Kimi at the same time. And what ended up happening is they were 3 in a row. Somehow Kimi was turned in. So Oscar ended up hitting Kimi, who ended up hitting Charles, who spun out, his wheels flew off, and he was out of the race, which was horrible for Charles. But the thing is, Oscar ended up getting a 10-second penalty for that situation. I personally think that that's an insane penalty to give him because, let's start from the beginning. So Oscar goes to overtake Kimi. There is space down the inside on Kimi's inside. There's plenty of space. But Kimi starts turning. He's basically like turned in towards Lando, and he's basically following Lando's racing line up ahead, which does end up cutting Oscar off. But Kimi should have continued to go straight, basically. And he didn't. And when Oscar realized that Kimi was cutting him off and not giving him the space that was there, it's not like Oscar created space. There was enough space for him there. Just Kimi ended up turning in. Oscar braked to get out of that situation because he realized he was about to be cut off. But it ended up, because Kimi was already turned in, the braking wasn't enough, so he ended up hitting Kimi. Kimi spun a little bit, hit Charles, and he went out. From what I understand, the penalty is because the penalty is given and is judged based on whether the driver causing the incident had control of the car. And I assume that because Oscar locked up, so he braked, but he ended up locking up. And because of the lockup, that was judged as not having control of the car. However, he did have control of the car. That's why he braked. It inadvertently caused the lockup, but that is also not what caused Charles to crash. Kimi turning in towards Oscar is what caused this whole incident. To me, that's a racing incident. Not like, if we're going to issue blame, it's probably about 50-50 to Oscar and Kimi. Kimi should be aware of what's going on the left side, but it all happened so fast. Like, it's not like I'm fully blaming him. Like, he's paying attention to Charles over there. He probably wasn't paying as much attention to Oscar on the left. Oscar sees a gap, so he goes for the gap. He had the opportunity, and he made the move was great, but Kimi was in his way, and not because there was no space when Oscar went for the move. He got a 10-second penalty, which is a rough time lapse to recover from. I mean, he didn't recover from it. And also, it's not just me that's against this, or that thinks there was something weird going on. Charles, in his post-race interview, was saying that he doesn't think Oscar shouldn't have gotten the full blame. There are rules, and if that's how the situation was interpreted, then he guesses they were following the rules, but he doesn't think that he's fully to blame, and it's probably like split down the middle. Even Kimi said, like, I probably turned in more than I should have. Weirdly enough, the only people who didn't say that Oscar wasn't at fault was McLaren. They're like, we accept this penalty from the FIA. We need to review things. Like, Andrea Stella after the race is like, I still need to review because I've only seen the race and I've only seen the telemetry and I've only seen Oscar's onboard. I'm like, so you've seen all of it. I'm not like, even if they weren't going to go and argue with the stewards, they could at the very least be like, we don't think he was at fault, but we understand why the stewards did that. They never said that. They were just like, we're just going to go with what the stewards say. Which, again, I'm not trying to perpetuate any conspiracy theories about McLaren sabotaging their own driver. I don't think those are true, but I do think they could put in a little more effort to show their support of Oscar, because I do think that some of Oscar's performance issues stem less from external pressure and more from feeling kind of unsupported internally. And this is all conjecture. I don't know if that's true, but that's what it feels like. Show you guys. I don't know if you can see. I don't know where the camera is. Anyway, I do think that, okay, I'll just talk about it now. I think there's several things going on with Oscar's performance. I think there's an element that we can't explain that just is weird and out of nowhere. I think there's an element that Oscar's strongest tracks were in the first half of the calendar and not the second half of the calendar. Like he clearly really struggles on these tracks more. The third issue, I think, is that there was an upgrade offered. Lando took it. Oscar did not. He kept his car as it was, and perhaps that upgrade makes the car perform better on these tracks than it did in the European leg. I think all of those things are at play. I know people are saying this is the first time he's fighting for a world championship against Max Verstappen, plus his own teammate. All of that is a lot of pressure. I honestly feel like that's the least of Oscar's concerns. I feel like he doesn't feel particularly supported by his team. I feel like he thinks it's one thing after another. I think he thinks these tracks aren't his strong suit. I think it's he does not feel comfortable in this car, and it shows. I think there's a whole bunch of things that are happening that are causing this extreme downfall in performance. Because again, I think I talked about this last time. We saw Lando buckle under the pressure last year when he was fighting Max for the championship, but his performance was not as consistently exceptional in the first half of the season. His good performances were quite sporadic, and then he started doing better, and then the pressure was clearly getting to him. So I think we're seeing a dip in performances in the second half of the season in a fight for the drivers' championship, but I think they're caused by different things. And I do think that McLaren needs to figure out how to manage a championship-winning team better, and how to manage a championship-winning team with two championship-worthy drivers. There's no D1, D2 here, although I don't know if that'll change depending on who wins the Drivers' Championship, unless, of course, it's Max Verstappen. All right, speaking of McLaren, they were on an interesting strategy today. Lando got told that he would either be Plan D or Plan B, and we haven't heard a Plan D shout-out in a while. I don't think I've heard a past Plan C this year, so that was exciting. Oscar, on the other hand, was on Plan B, C. Lando was getting B or D. Oscar got C. At one point, Oscar was asking what the plan was, and then he was told that the plan was to undercut a couple people and then push forward that way. And then he got on the radio again. He was like, I hope you're more optimistic than I am, because from here it's not looking good. And then they pitted him. That didn't really seem in line with the strategy they outlined, although I could have misunderstood the strategy they outlined. It seemed like that didn't help. But Oscar was right. It wasn't looking good from where he was. He was correct. He started in P4 and ended up finishing in P5 behind George. Max had an exceptional race. He started in the pit lane and he somehow made his way to the top. He was leading the race at one point. GP got on the radio one time. He's like, something I did not think I was going to tell you when you left the pit lane earlier this afternoon. You're leading the race. He ended up finishing P3, which honestly was a close call, but given everything going on with his car and the rest of the performances, it was pretty good. And also he got a puncture early on in the race, and so they had to pit. I think they ended up pitting 3 times. And so given all of that, the fact that he podiumed after starting in the pit lane is crazy and something only Max Verstappen could do. Then towards the end, in the last 5 laps, there were 2 battles growing. Max trying to overtake Kimi and Oscar trying to overtake George. And they were like within tenths of a second. They were so close. And immediately I was like, should we issue a virtual safety car for no reason? Should we do that? They're back to Mexico. But there were no incidents and no virtual safety cars. And we did get both of those battles right to the finish line. But alas, neither Oscar nor Max could make an overtake stick. But they came damn close. Like, it almost looked like they crossed the finish line like, doo-doo. Like, so close, insanely close. We had quite a few penalties. In addition to Oscar's 10-second penalty, Lewis had a 5-second penalty for causing a collision with Franco. Yuki got a 10-second penalty, and then he got a second 10-second penalty for failing to serve the first 10-second penalty correctly. So here's what's confusing to me about these. Like, I know this happens all the time. It's not about specifically Yuki, but there's an FIA representative and a team representative with stopwatches standing there timing penalties conducted in the pit lane. They tell the team when to go. So is it the FIA's fault that the team went too early, or did the team accidentally touch the car before he said go? Like, how do these infringements happen is my question. But yeah, poor Yuki. Not a great day for Yuki Tsunoda. The podium was Max, Kimi, and Lando. As per usual, Lando poured champagne on whoever was in his way before making his way over to his team representative. Max sprayed Kimi till there was nothing left in the bottle, and Kimi vice versa. I just love that Max wanted to make sure, or did make sure, I don't know if he like actively thought about it, but he ensured that Kimi had a memorable podium experience. And this is also... Toto was interviewed after the race, and he was asked, what's it like for Kimi to finish so high? And he was like, well, he's been on the podium before. And the interviewer was like, yeah, I'm P3. This is second. And he was like, second, right. Oh, right. Yeah. No, this is such a good finish for Kimi. Like, I don't think he realized he finished in second, and he had to recover very quick. I don't know what planet he was on. I think this was after the podium ceremony. This was post-race. It was really funny. I just like had no idea for some reason that Kimi finished second. Also during the podium, during the English national anthem, the crowd was, you could hear it faintly, but the crowd was chanting do Max Verstappen. And I'm just loving that he's getting all this love now. I guess he's like an adopted Brazilian because of Kelly. But also post-race, Lando was like, we weren't really the fastest car. We could have finished with a better lead, blah, 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 blah. I don't think this entire year Lando has a single time acknowledged that he has the fast. I'm probably misremembering. He probably did towards the beginning, but in my memory, he has yet to admit that he has a rocket ship and one of the fastest car and the fastest car on the grid for like the majority of the time. He's still somehow implying that like Max has a faster car than him. Max does not have a faster car than you. Max is faster than you. Two very different things. So the driver of the day was Max, and honestly, well-deserved. From pit lane to P3, almost P2, 10 out of 10. Flawless. He's just so good. He's so good. Dick in the box, I think, is the FIA because they misjudged, I think, the incident with Oscar and Kimi. I think it was a racing incident, and I think they screwed Oscar finally trying to get a leg up in this championship. I don't know if they're trying to overcompensate for screwing in with the championship in 2021, but like it was unnecessary. The race results are as follows: Lando, Kimi, Max, George, Oscar, Ollie, Liam, Isaac, Nico, Pierre, Alex, Esteban, Carlos, Fernando, Franco, Lance, Yuki, and then Lewis, Charles, and Gabby DNF'd. The driver standings are as follows, with Lando has 390 points, Oscar has 366 points, Max has 341, George 276, Charles 214, Lewis 148, Kimi 122, Alex 73, Nico 43, Isaac 43. Those are the top 10. There are 24 points between Lando and Oscar, so almost a full race win. And there's 3 races left in a sprint race. And Max is still there. Max is still there, freaking everyone out. And I love it. Do I think he's going to win the Drivers' Championship? No. Do I think he's going to make it a damn close fight? Yes. He's going to make it, and he's going to do what needs to be done to make this entertaining to the end. And hopefully Oscar's move today will encourage him to continue doing these ballsy moves and trying a little harder. I'm not that I'm saying he's not trying, but like, let's go. Let's do shit. The constructor standings are McLaren with 756, Mercedes with 398, Red Bull with 366, Ferrari with 362, Williams with 111, Racing Bulls with 82, Aston Martin 72, Haas with 70, Kicksauber with 62, Alpine with 22. So lull at McLaren's lead. I mean, we all know they already won, but Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari are all pretty close. Well, Mercedes is pretty far ahead because they have two drivers performing, and Red Bull does not. And even Ferrari barely does. So that's it for the Brazilian Grand Prix. What a race. The title fight continues to be a nail biter. I'm hoping we're going to see a bit more spunk out of Oscar in the next few races, and get this championship fight to the very last finish, to the finish line in Abu Dhabi. Next week, or in 2 weeks. Yeah, in 2 weeks is Las Vegas. My favorite race on the calendar. It actually was a good race last year. I just hate cooking for it. So I'll probably drink because that's all you do in Vegas. It'll be a night race. Hopefully all the potholes are covered. And I'm excited to see what is next in this championship saga. Things just keep getting better and better. And like, it's so much more exciting than when Max was winning everything. It really is. Will Lando actually be Drivers' Championship? I don't know. It's kind of looking like it. Here are the cheese balls. Ta-da! And that's it. We'll see you soon. Box.